Lali, Neani Masawali, Centro Cultural La Raza. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name's Roberto Hernandez. I come on my mother's side from Huirarica territory in West Central Mexico. My father's side from Mam territory, straddling another border between Chiapas and Guatemala. And here at Centro, just one of many volunteers and current board members. I want to welcome each and every one of you on behalf of the Centro Cultural de la Raza to what we are very honored to have. In my humble opinion, it's a very historic conversation, an important conversation we had. David Avalos, who's here with us. We're just chatting a few days ago about how important and necessary this conversation is. So I want to thank everyone who's here joining us, as well as those of you that might be joining us via the live stream. So I don't want to spend too much time other than to say, currently we have the solo exhibit of the work of Celia Herrera Rodríguez, which is in our main gallery, in addition to these two other exhibits, The Future is Sacred and Chopowali, 52 Years of Sueño, the work of Guillermo Aranda, and the work of Antonia Davis, respectively. But in the context of having the solo exhibit, Teoría Chicana, of Celia Herrera Rodríguez, we thought it would be important to have two different conversations. So I do want to first begin by also making a short plug for Sunday's conversation. So today, we're honored to have a local Kumeyaay, Dr. Uncle Stan Rodríguez, Uncle Dr. Stan Rodríguez here, who has joined us and who has, I'll let them speak to it more, but also long history of relationship and friendship with our current artist, Celia Herrera Rodríguez. And on Sunday, we will be having a second conversation with Cheri Moraga and Irena de Cervantes, who is also both of whom are joining us here today. That one will be at Sunday at 2 p.m. and will also function as our closing reception for this current exhibit, even though this exhibit does run through October 15. That being said, again, this current exhibit and the broader work that's been happening under the auspices of Las Maestras Center for Chicana, Indigena, Art, Thought, and Social Praxis at the University of California, Santa Barbara. We as Centro Cultural have been very fortunate to be collaborating with them for the last several years on a number of projects, both here and in Santa Barbara. And we also want to give thanks to Maria Esther Fernandez, who I don't see here, but who is the new artistic director at the Cheech in Riverside. But Maria Esther Fernandez helped us with the curation of this current exhibit of Celia's. And then lastly, we also want to thank California Humanities. This project was made possible with the support of California Humanities, a nonprofit partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass the palabra on the mic. And again, just my own thanks and gratitude to both of you for what I know will be a very intimate and important conversation that many of us have been having for many years, but to have it in a more formal setting in this way really, really warms my heart, and look forward to that. Thank you.
Gracias. Should start with a little rezo.
Okay. Amaya Pao, Peli Yamak P. Nuranya Matayum, Sepukin Yacha Matau Maat, Sepukin Mayum Yaway Wuyupi, Yapomakanap. Nuranya Han, Yu Han, Han Hunap, Yapo Mayum Nasom, Sepukin, Mayum Nasom, Ahan Kanam, Yapo Masukam Nuima. Creator of all, your breath brings life into the universe. We ask that you bless us today as we come from the four directions into this place at this time. Bless us in our minds, in our hearts, in our bodies, as we come to talk, to share to speak. Bring us good things in our hearts to hear us, what we are saying. And when we are done, may we have safe journeys home until we see each other again. Yeha.
Gracias, abuelito, abuelita. Damos gracias por esta vida, damos gracias por esta tierra, damos gracias por estos pueblos, Tunkashla. Nos cuidas y damos gracias que continuamos en nuestra conciencia, en nuestro movimiento. Pensamos en todo lo que existe en este momento en lucha. Damos nuestra energía para los cambios que se necesitan para regresar a nuestras conciencias y pueblos. Ajá. For you.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's see, on somewhere. Got it. Thank you. I'm really grateful and very happy to see all of you, so many of you here, and friends, students, comadres, compadres, and especially happy to be in the centro. I really want to keep saying over and over again how it matters to have centros throughout. It is a place of grounding, a place where we come to not only be in community, but to build community amongst each other. And I really respect and honor all of the work and all of the commitment over generations. People have passed on that began this work and passed it on to us. And so it's been a beautiful experience to come and see the life and also the revival, the reanimation of this space, and looking around and seeing how when Centros first began, it was as a way of putting our work somewhere. And I love them especially because unlike galleries that open and close, and certain people can walk in the door that know how to walk in that door, this has a built-in audience. People come in from all over to do many things. And as they walk in, from the children that run through and get excited with the color and curiosity, to the rest of us that, come in generationally and look at the walls and spend time and think as we do other things in culture. So the work becomes an integrated part of our lives. And that's something that can't happen. Although I believe museums and galleries have their place, in our world still to this day. But these spaces are precious. And so as we lose them across the state, I'm really happy that you all, as a community, have kept this alive. And so my prayer is continuity and growth and change, whatever it takes to continue to be, part of the aliveness of our people. And so I wanted to speak to Stan. I asked, it's part of something that I had been wanting to do and have been little by little, because COVID interrupted it in many ways and helped us in other ways in terms of having to deal with technology. We never expected that we would have to learn so quickly how to make ourselves, how to continue our work, basically. But the project was really a convening. I don't know, Stan, if you remember, but in those old days, as they say, people came together, and they spent time together learning. The people brought the elders, everybody came, sat, talked, visited. You learned so much from the elder because you sat next to them and you had a conversation. And we learned from each other and how to do things because you had to do it. We had to invent everything around us for many times, or remember things around us, in order to be able to be in participation. And so I wanted to achieve that again, to be able to come, not as heads like this, talking heads as I refer to, or that where we're talking that way, but to be sitting amongst each other in conversation. And so that is almost I don't know why it's so difficult to do now. Maybe because we're all attached to this and we all have our schedules and, it's difficult. But what I wanted to do was to recall a conversation that we started years ago at DQU. I met Stan when we were very young. We're remembering how old we were then. At DQ, we met around the fire, which is a precious place to meet, around the fire. We spent, I think, the whole night taking care of that fire for the sweat lodges for the Sundance at DQU, just to give it context. And somewhere like around 1981 or
1979.
1979, oh my goodness. Okay, well.
No pressure.
No pressure. Well, there we are. So, now, because there's so much politica, so many words and theories present, and not condemning theory, because I feel like it's important that we're thinking. It so matters that we're analyzing and thinking, but it's sometimes gets on top of the making, the practice. And I feel like, if the theory leads us, I'm not sure if that's always good. I feel like the practice is what develops into ideas and thinking. I think that's how our people have always made culture, not the other way around. So I wanted to continue this conversation with Stan. We started so many years ago. And it is a historical conversation because it's talking about the history, relationship of us that named ourselves Chicanos, the original name. And I always want to honor it by saying it was young people who named ourselves, young people, who decided that, that they really had who took it upon themselves, the authority to name themselves. And that, I think, is something that we don't really honor enough, as young people now are trying to say who they are and find language that says who they are as young people. And so I honor and respect that history, and I continue to call myself Chicana because of that struggle of naming and then performing that naming. What did it mean? Because I think in these generations, some of the history and some of the meaning has disappeared or has been changed, by those that weren't present. So I wanted to remember that connection that was made as a self-naming and then where that took us. And in many ways, I also wanted to remember that it was the Native California elders, in my case, many others, depending where we were, that welcomed us into their homes and into their hearts and said to us, we're opening this door to you because we want to help you, and we want to help you get home. And so the getting home is what I call homework. I'm not sure how good we have been at doing our homework, but I wanted to then kind of look at it over a span of time and think about, what we've learned, at the knee and the doorstep of those elders in their homes and communities, and what did we learn about ourselves, and what have we grown over these years. And sometimes I think of 50 years, but sometimes I think, no, we gotta think about it. If we lift up the colonial timeline, the colonial veil, everything that tells us what time and what it looks like, if we lift it up, we find a relationship that's much older. What that is up to us to, do our homework and think about it that way rather than trying to think about 1848 or 1824 or 1964. So I'm going to open with that, and I wanted to thank Stan, and I want to honor you. I feel that since that moment of meeting at DQ, there was something important happened at DQ. And so I wanted to turn to you and ask you your experience from that moment and how that sort of directed you in your life and your work.
Moya estamos en hecho niña marco país con pero hijo niña voy pi no puedo canap. Bienvenido, mi nombre es Stan Rodríguez, yo soy para Kumeyaay de la Reserva Santa Isabel aquí en San Diego. Parte de mi tribu está aquí, 12 reservas indígenas, 4 más en Baja California, México. Es porque yo puedo hablar español por un chueco, pero no ya sé. ¿Usted entiende? No de mentiras, pues. ¿Entiende? All right, I entiende English. Anyway, just want to say, yes, I am. My name is Stan Rodríguez. I'm an Ipai Kumeyaay from the San Isabel Reservation here in San Diego, part of the 12 reservations that are Kumeyaay territory. The international border cut our territory in half. There's 46 Kumeyaay reservations in Baja. And I'm a singer, and we go back and forth. I'll sing velorios, wakes, things like this. And, when we talk about people who have been displaced, this is something that happens. What happens when a group becomes displaced? You start losing your language, you start losing your culture. You've seen this. You've seen this happen. You see this happen within your own communities. Now, you brought up something about DQ. How many of you ever heard of DQ University? 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait, do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The rest of you haven't? Look at me. I want to tell you something. Hey, I know that young girl with the glasses. But anyway, DQ was started early 70s. What happened was, when the people were evicted from Alcatraz, what they wanted to do was they wanted to start an indigenous school to teach decolonization, decolonialize ourselves. So in Davis, there was abandoned Army listening post, and Governor Reagan at the time wanted to turn it into a primate research center. Well, Native people and Chicanos came and they took it over. The Chicanos were on the outside. The Native people were able to get in, jump over the fence because of our status. We're federally recognized, so we weren't going to get arrested for trespassing on federal, we're already federal wards, so, what could they do to us? So once it was taken, they decided they wanted to name it, give it a name. So D stands for Chicana, or the lawgiver of the Iroquois people, and Q for Quetzalcoatl. And what is Quetzalcoatl? Good answer, plume serpent. You're doing great. Stay with me on this, people. So as this happened, as this started to grow, wanted to take that concept of decolonization to our communities. Let me ask all of you this. How many of you are Native people? Some of you aren't raising your hands. How many of you who are Native people speak your indigenous language? I guess some of you are like this, okay. And this is the problem. This is what takes place with language shift, cultural shift. You see this happening in indigenous communities throughout the Americas. And DQ wanted to reverse that language shift, reverse that cultural shift. How many of you are danzantes? Anybody here? How many of you remember a person named Florencio Yescas? I got to meet him in 1975 over in Olivera Street with Miss Cobb and a group from DQ University. We went over there. And one of the things about DQ was we celebrated our own indigeneity. We supported each other's indigeneity, going out there, having these things. How many of you remember Rosette? What's his name? Yeah, Lázaro, Rio, all that crew. Yeah, I remember them. They were 18, 19 years old back then. I'm not trying to, say how old I am, but you can already figure it out. But, these are some of the things that DQ taught. How many of you are learning how to speak Nahuatl? One of the indigenous languages in Mexico. That was being taught. That was taught by Miss Cobb at DQ. Lakota was being taught. You remember Daryl Standing now, keep teaching that. All of this was we wanted to change the narrative, because what was happening in the 60s, the civil rights movement was taking place. Before that, how were Indian people considered? We're considered dogs. We're considered less than. How many of you ever heard, oh yes, I'm Spanish, I'm blah, 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 blah. Oh, but my grandma I think, was part Indian. But I'm not. Really? What happened? Were they, genetically spliced you or something? What happened? The embarrassment of our own indigeneity. This is something that is so important to be able to grab it, to hold it, to have it grow like a seed within ourselves. Because I'm going to tell you something. Prior to that, we were fed a lot of propaganda, lies, and we were seen as less than. Look at this. Some of you say, hey Stan, you got a suntan. Duh. No kidding. I am dark. I'm a native person. I'm Kumeyaay, indigenous. There was a time when people were ashamed of that color. I've never been ashamed of it. That is part of our resistance, is to take that back. Take back our pride in who we are. And that's what DQ is all about. I remember when Dennis Banks first came. This was after Wounded Knee. There were people that were coming to DQ that were on the run after Wounded Knee, taking off. Some were going to Canada, some were trying to go to Mexico. And Dennis Banks showed up in California. He was on the run. Governor Brown at the time gave him amnesty, so he came to DQ. This happened, remember, 1976. DQ supported our struggles. The longest walk happened, the first longest walk happened, went through DQ. All the others went through DQ. Many things happened over there. That campus closed in 2004, 2005. Trying to restart it, but it lives on. Right now, I'm the president of Kumeyaay Community College. We're the only Aboriginal tribal college in California that offers an accredited associate's degree, and we're working on offering an accredited bachelor's program. Some of the people who are here have been students at Kumeyaay Community College. We started off as a satellite of DQ. So what I'm saying is the seed of that lives today in each and every one of us. To be able to grab that and allow that to grow is important. But what I've noticed is many of you, Celia, it seems like many of these people need a history lesson to remember what took place, the things that have gone on. Back in 1979, I was 21, you were what, 23? Okay. And I have to say this about Celia. I don't know if you know this about her. She's like too cool to lose, man. She was out in Cuba, cutting, sugar cane. Fidel Castro was there. I remember you got caught over in Yucatan. They were taking your pictures, but you flew out anyway. This lady, she is a warrior. She is a warrior woman. I just wanted to share that with you. She's an artist, and she's a warrior, an activist. In our language, we say Chachaya Khan, which means I praise you. I praise you for everything that you do. So I just want to share that. Thank you.
I think this is well, Stan, what you brought up in me was when we introduced ourselves, and I didn't say, my family's from Durango. My family's from the ranchitos in Durango. And when I began, thinking about who am I, none of the family wanted to speak about who we were. We all insisted we were Mexicanos, and that was enough, Mexicanos. And we were from the rancho, and we were here, and get on with it. nothing to look back to. Just get on with our lives, progress. I think it was I don't know if it was the car first or the husband first or the house first, but it was husband, house, and, and move it along. So my family was very annoyed by the consistency of my questions. My grandmother referred to me as a coyote because I was always looking for something I couldn't find, just looking. And finally my tia came. And it was after I had an exhibit up at her Puffers, remember the Folsom Trader's store? Wonderful, wonderful man who collected and supported Native arts. And he says, Celia, you have to tell me where you're from, what are you gotta have something. And I was, really not wanting to be good, true. And so, of course, I went home and I was asking, and finally my tia came to visit from Durango, and I asked my tia, I was giving her a massage, She was having a hard time, so I was massaging her legs. And when I was massaging her legs, I asked her, Tia, ¿quiénes somos? She goes, pues Tepehuanes, mija. And I thought, that's where we're from, Sandias Tepehuanes. And I thought, it couldn't be that simple. And so it started me on this journey of finding out what it meant. The history of Durango, the history of the territory that my family, and one thing that happened over the years was that I had to decide that my grandmother was the authority, that if I believed, in a decolonial perspective, then it was my abuela who became the authority, had to be, not the book, not the history book, not the anthropologist, not the archaeologist, but my grandmother. And so when she said, we've been in Durango since the sun was born, I accept that that's the truth. I don't know my father other than to say he's from San Luis Potosí, but my entire family is from the ranchos in Durango, in Sandias Tepehuanes. And so in finding and looking at that research, it forced me to look at Nueva Galacia, Nueva Vizcaya, Nuevo León, looking above and below and trying to figure out the history of how I wound up in Sacramento without family, without land. And that has been, the piece of DQ. Senora Cobb, who I met as a child, was the first time in my entire life as a child that I saw Mexicano-ness outside my home. In the danza folklórica that she sponsored with my really good friends. And I was too shy to dance, but I started making art by helping her do the sequences on the faldas. And so I ran into her later in college, carrying a stack of books about that high, going through campus, and I offered to help her. Next thing I know, we're on the way to LA to some danza meeting that she has. Wonderful maestra, Senora Cobb. So I say that because there's still that when I say who I am, Odami, Tepehuanes, and people ask me, are you Indian? And I say, yes. Where are you from? And I say, Durango. The mountains, the other side of the Sierra Madre, the foothills in Durango. And I see their faces fall. And in their response is, you're Mexican. And there's right away that separation between Mexican and American. And so, it makes me mad sometimes. I get, especially now that I'm older, I feel more brava, and I don't hold it back as much. Those breaks that we have that weren't true as young people. We had struggles. We didn't know each other. It wasn't all nice and pretty. But I think that we united around the work that needed to be done at the time. And we supported each other's struggles. I think as Chicanos, people found themselves in Frank's Landing and Tule River, at Tule Lake. They found themselves in places where there was struggle and supported those struggles. The organization that was started in LA, and we participated in La Red Chicana Indígena, which is represented at the UN, one of the few organizations, Chicana organizations at the UN, and Chicana indigenous organizations at the UN, has really opened the conversation for us to see ourselves as people, represented by those 37 articles of, the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Indigenous peoples, that we too, have this possibility possibility of self-determination. And so if we support self-determination, what part of that says someone else can tell you how to do it? We have to be in conversation with each other. There's a way in which every day pueblos are lost due to the pressures of economics, to the pressures of the environment, and are on the road that we've been living in for a long time. And I think at the UN, what was recognized about Chicanas was that we've been living on the road for a long time, and we know something about that path. We know something about that road. People are interested in how we continue to keep our identity as indigenous peoples in spite of all the pressures to forget. And so that conversation led me to a conversation with my son Elish, who asked me, he told me once in a conversation we were having, he says, it seems like everybody's got their degree, Mom, in Native Studies. They've all got their PhDs. He goes, but it feels sometimes that no one's gone to middle school. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, we talk all of this very high-level conversation, but, what is the basis of it? What's the guts of it? And so this what led me to thinking about values, about what is it that we went looking for, all of us, in search, with great hunger. I too, starving, hunger, go to the communities, and I have to say, the communities, the abuelitas, the abuelitos, they opened the door and they fed us, whatever they had. And I'm so grateful to that. Because in sitting there and building relationships over the years that we built, it allowed us then to kind of reflect back to our homes. It took a while. You know how you go out of your house looking for something and realize it's right there in your own home? But it takes you a while to mature to that understanding. So sitting in ceremony someplace along the line, I realized that I needed to go home. And so I went home to ask, again, to see, to look, now with eyes that could see what was there in front of me. While I'm asking the questions, it's right there in front of me. So that's the question of the values. What are the value systems that have led us through this struggle? And then I wanted to get specific and think about it, from the different pueblos, not as, indigenous is the only word I know that combines us. We can come up with new language. That would be a good task, to find other ways of speaking of ourselves, Sometimes when I think about all the ways that we say Chicano, which I'm using a lot tonight, but it's Chicano, Chicana, Chicanao, and Chicanex, and I started thinking that maybe we should refer to ourselves as Chi. The people of Chi. Those of us who remember what Chi means, that we think of ourselves that way, and speak of ourselves in that manner, because, we're talking about many, many different peoples from many different areas and many traditions that have come together here in the path. I mean, walking through from the edge of Peru all the way up to here, and maybe the other direction también. That's how we find ourselves now in this time. So I wanted to get to the homework, right, to the specificities of what we have in our own homes. What did we pick up at home? And so, te lo paso.
What I'm saying is that this land here is our holy land, Kumeyaay holy land. Each mountain has a name, a story to it in our creation story. The ocean, there's stories about it in our creation story. The Coronado Islands is in our creation story. All these things, and to know it, to understand it, to understand where we come from is important to us for our identity. I'm going to throw this back on you guys, ladies and gentlemen, forgive me. How many of you from like Durango, Zacatecas, Aguascalientes have family from out in that area? Okay. What can you tell me about your people out in that area. That's what I thought. Have you ever heard of the Chichimeca revolt? Do you, when you hear about Mexico, you hear about the indigenous civilizations and the conquistadors, right? Did they really conquer us? I'm going to tell you something. Hell no. It was our own people that did it to themselves. They never had the numbers to take our people down. It was our own people fighting against each other, and they would turn our people against each other. The Chichimeca War was over 50 years. It almost ran the Spaniards out of Mexico. The Indian War was almost successful. What happened, the Spaniards employed Mexica, Tlaxcalan, and other different groups that they had turned against our indigenous people. They were the elements of our people, the ones that were able to overcome us. I want you to remember that. Our Kumeyaay people, we have endured 3 waves of encroachment. The Spanish wave, with the missions, the Mexican wave. When I say Mexican wave, I see some Mexican, what do you mean, Stan? Hang on, I'll let you know. And the American wave. 3 waves. The reason I brought up the Chichimeca revolt was the Spaniards came up with an idea on how to deal with people who are mobile. The thing that they were able to take down the Mexica Empire and even the Inca Empire was it was a stratified government. They had different classes and they were not mobile. So what they would do was surround, overcome, take them down, and then they would marry the daughters of the leaders. So the people were used to sending produce and other things up, but the ruling caste would eventually redistribute it. That didn't happen under the Spaniards. That was to Spain and then to richer coffers. But when they went to the Mission revolt and then the Chichimeca revolt, the problems that they were having with indigenous people were much more mobile. They moved around much more. They couldn't take them out. Take out the chief, the next one took. Then the next one. They could not take them out the way that they did before. So what they did was they recognized religion, the mission system. And that's what they brought onto the California Peninsula and started bringing that up. So the Spaniards were only here for about 50-some years, from 1769, just for 50-some years. And what happened? How many of you have seen, some of the, what do you call it? Yes, exactly, propaganda on, yes, the Indians just went to the missions, taught Catholicism, they loved it. If we left it so much, why did we attack the mission 3 months after they put it up? Why on November 5th, 1775, hundreds of Kumeyaay warriors came down upon the mission, burned it to the ground, found Father Jaime and 2 other people executed them for crimes against the Kumeyaay people. Why? How many people have been to Mexico? I know this is a stupid question. How many people have been to Tijuana? How many people have been to Ensenada? More people have been to Ensenada than Tijuana? Oh. In between Tijuana and Ensenada, there's a place. You know what this down? It's called La Misión. What does that mean, the mission? There was a priest that was there, a Kumeyaay war chief named Black Leaf, Black Dog, came down with hundreds of warriors. They burned that mission to the ground. They were looking for the priest and would execute him. But that priest was hiding under the skirt of a Kumeyaay woman. He got away, but we caught him later. My people caught him later in Ensenada and whacked him. So this was what was happening. Missions were being burnt down throughout Kumeyaay territory. Remember, it was only about 50 years. And then what was happening around 1811? I see people counting up. What's that? Mexico was fighting to gain independence. I liked how you said it, though. So anyway, and what happened? What was one of the things that was going on? The indigenous population of Mexico was rising up, finally rising up. There were two factions. One faction was the indigenous population that wanted independence. They were tired. They were tired of, being treated as, indentured servants or slaves. Como dice, esclavos? Yeah, tired of esclavos. No, there was another group, the Spaniards who were born in Mexico, that wanted to keep the system because they believed the Spanish government was becoming too liberal. So when that happened, one of the things that they wanted to do was they wanted to secularize the missions, give the mission land back to the native people throughout Mexico. But the Spaniards who were born in Mexico wanted to make estancias. They wanted to make this huge estate and continue using the native population as slave labor. Our people, Kumeyaay people, we revolted, we fought. 3 times San Diego almost fell to Kumeyaay attacks. We almost took all of San Diego back. The 3rd time, the Spaniards who were from Mexico were over by Point Loma. They were trying to get out of Dodge. The British schooner was using its cannons and, to repel the attack. It got so bad, the governor of California went to Monterey and some of the other states farther south, and they did this. Let's say all of you are in prison, okay? Imagine that. You're all in prison. Some of you are going to get executed next week, others are going to do the rest of your life. Good? Are you feeling it? And I come and say, well, you can stay here and enjoy the ambiance, or I can pardon you, and you can become part of my militia. You're going to protect a place called San Diego. How many of you want to join the militia? Nobody? Okay, one person. If you shake the tree, the apples will fall. How many of you want to get out of prison? I like how you, okay, Stan, I'm coming. All right. Some of you just want to stay. Whatever. So anyway, they were all brought to San Diego. They called it the California Cholo Militia. They called it the Cholo Militia, the Cholos. And they protected San Diego from Kumeyaay attacks. However, they weren't getting paid. So what happened was they were looting the stores in Old Town. So what happened, the Mexican government just exiled them all. So then what happened later on? The Mexican-American War. Why was the Mexican-American War taking place? I know I'm giving you a crash course Kumeyaay history lesson. Come on, people, stay with me on this. What's that? Slavery. Tell me about that. Okay. And Texas wanted to become a state in the Union, but it was a slave state. The problem was the Union was balanced between slave and non-slave states. So they needed another state to balance it up. Who do you think they were coming for? Go ahead, begins with a C, ends with an A. Good answer, California, okay. You're here with me. So the battle happened, fight happened. Where was the only battle in the Mexican-American War held in California? What's that? Say it? All right. It wasn't the Battle of Bakersfield. Okay, yeah, it was the Battle of San Diego. And where did it happen? What? San Pascual. How many days was the battle? 15 minus 13 makes it 2. 2-day battle. Who won the battle? Boy, you got to take a class with me. Who won the battle? It's either the Americans or the Mexicans. Take your pick. Huh? National City, what? All right, the Mexicans won that battle, but they lost the war. And the Americans came, and what they did, policy towards extermination of the native people here. One of the problems that they had, and that happened up north, and you remember up in Sacramento, those areas, Northern California, whole nations were exterminated. Governor Barnett, the governor at the time, he said that the war between the red man and the white man will continue until all the red men are exterminated. He created bounties for the heads of native people. Children, 50 cents. Women, $2.50. Men, $5. They paid over $1 million on this, and this was back in 1870 or 1847, 48, 49. Down here in San Diego, it's a little bit different. Why do you think? Okay, good answer. During that Mexican-American War, it was split. Half the Kumeyays were fighting for the Americans, half were fighting for the Mexicans. So the Mexicans were supplying Kumeyays with firearms. In other words, the Kumeyays were much better armed than the tribal groups up north. And we still continued raids, but guess what happened? What did they put to Kumeyaay territory? Madkakatopit. Say that, Madkakatopit. Translated, that means La Línea, okay? They made the border. Our people could go back and forth. It was our territory. But a lot of times, they would have raiders go, and they would go into Mexico, they would stay away. So the thing that I'm saying is this: our territory, our language, our culture is part of this. It's this area. And although we have endured 3 waves of encroachment, and the boarding schools and other policies that were created in order to exterminate our culture and assimilate our people. Mayum ima nyechiyo nyuwop. Mayum wiyupi nyep mat ipe nyuwop. And what I said is, when we sing our songs, that's resistance. When we dance our traditional dances, that is resistance. When we speak our language, that is resistance. When we reside in our traditional territory, that is resistance. They could never take that. And even though they put that border and they put the border wall and everything, we still go back and forth. We still go across. Nobody stops us. The only one that's going to stop us will be ourselves. And that's the thing that I just wanted to share with all of you. You all came from incredible cultures, civilizations, but many of you don't know. You don't remember. It wasn't taught to you. When you teach that, when you unlearn what you have been taught before, and you learn about your own people and your own culture, it's a seed that you're putting. And as you water it with your activism, as you water it with decolonizing, it gets stronger and stronger. And we are all from different cultures. We are all from different people. However, when we come together, we are strong, we are powerful. We support each other. We support our indigeneity. We're like a bundle of arrows. We are unbreakable. So I just wanted to share that with you, my friends and family. Unlearn by learning. Kanawahan. Learn the truth. Turn that around for yourself. And I look forward to seeing your growth. So I just want to share that.
And I think I want to take a moment to reflect on what you were just saying. The importance of DQ, the importance of us coming together. Even my trip to Cuba, was eye-opening in the sense that it showed me the continent. It showed me beyond the continent. It showed me that what I was experiencing in my own home in Sacramento, California was not isolated. That there were reasons, that there was racism, that there was censorship, that there were ways in which, we were not, that we were contained. it was amazing to see the news of the world in Cuba. Amazing to see the news of the world. To see the truth, that you can see it, you can understand it. Coming back from Cuba, what, 18 years old, 18, about there. It spurred me to become integrated and involved in my community. Not necessarily in Sacramento, but looking at the larger picture, Sacramento included. So I wanted to reflect on you that the politics, when we talk about values at home that we share, I think what we share is the value of resistance. That there's something in those values. And I want to take it back to my grandmother. I want to take it back home, because as you speak about the warriorship and the resistance, I know for a fact that the Odami people fought. They fought. The Spanish did not stroll through southern Mexico north, like they always talk about, having kind of strolled and, you know, sexy warriors and having women everywhere they went, you know. They've had to fight their way, and it took them a long time to fight their way through Mexico into the north. They never speak that way. And as we hear the battles here, there are others and other histories that we don't know. We don't know the histories. I understood that the peoples of Tepehuanes fought in the same way, those, you know, sort of genocidal war that was waged against them, because they couldn't use the southern route, they couldn't use the way that they colonized in the south. And prior to missionization, or using the process of missionization, they also would capture the warriors, they would burn the fields, they would take the families and disperse them into slavery. They would send the children up north into slavery, called criados. Doesn't make sense then to understand why we call people criados, because they were raised in slavery. And send the folks that were resistant, women and men, south into Yucatan and into Cuba. So interestingly enough, we have a lot of relatives in Cuba. We have relatives there and all across those islands, and all of the fields in the Yucatan, and the mahogany fields and the henequen fields, and all of those generational, you know, capitalist, imperialist ventures. Knowing that, then, I feel that I can say that I come from the people who stayed, who did not flee after the war, but stayed within the families in those ranchos. And those, then what form, I asked myself, did folks resist? What is it that is a legacy of resistance in my own home? And so it was my grandmother's language, her words, her saying to me that above anything else, integrity mattered, one's own integrity, being able to stand up for oneself, and being able to stand up against whatever opinion or whatever was being, you know, whatever was happening around you. And there was a strength in my grandmother's language, first feminist that I ever knew, as she explained to me the society in which women, you know, were at risk. A society in which women did not had to count on men for leadership, for voice. In her own words, she explained to me then, you know, why it was that we, as two single women, a grandmother and her granddaughter, were in danger all the time. And how it is that we had to behave in order for us to, you know, be able to have respect in our community. At the same time, she explained to me how the home in Durango was, you know, was organized. She explained to me that our home in Durango was her home, the kitchen, the main fireplace. And from that then came the attachment of the brothers and the other family. But her home, with respect for that fire and respect for her leadership and respect for her, you know, abilities, was primary. And so as I went back to look at the things that my mom and her actions and how she dealt with her day and how she dealt with, you know, living in this society, trying to raise me and explain to me the things that she knew that sometimes didn't make sense in the society, but coming back to it, I saw the way that she continued to practice her culture. And although, you know, sometimes, you know, I always laugh because I say my mom used copal, she used copal on me, you know, when I had my tantrums as a little girl. She would burn the copal and she would say, salte, diablo, salte. She'd get the, you know, the bay leaves and she would, you know, clean me off, you know. wake me up the next morning at dawn, let the wind hit me and say, salte, diablo, salte, make sure I'd be good for the whole week. But what it brings back to me was the memory of how she did things. And it was in the she of resistance that I grew up and realized that she was among the people who stayed, and among the people who stayed who continued to practice their culture. Even though I really feel that part of the issue that we have in not remembering, because it's amazing to me, thank you Stan, to see how we have not done our homework. All of us, especially who belong to, the Chicanx and all of the other Chi people studies, right? Chi people studies. My son asked, when we come out of Native studies, if we come out of Chi studies, we should be able to sing songs, we should be able to say a prayer in our language, we should be able to make some art, do some beadwork, dance. Besides everything else, we should be able to remember those things. And if we don't know those things, how can we claim a PhD? Okay. And so when you think about that, it also brings up the fact that, what are we really studying? How is it that we've prepared ourselves to understand who we are and continue on in our studies? Right now, the question is, where are we going? We can rename ourselves, but it doesn't mean that, you put a new sign, Cesar Chavez Way over Lawrence Way, it's still, it's still the same street. So those are the questions, I think, in looking at values, and thank you, Stan, because, the value of resistance and struggle, and to hear you talk about war, right now we're also polite. We've been polite. I think that was the first breakthrough for me, having to deal in the movement with having been raised to be polite and accept leadership and be respectful, and then confronting power. With all of that, having to step out of line in order to change, in order to make change, not for no reason at all, but because to change, sometimes you have to step out of line. What does that mean? So it's complex. But I think looking back at the value of, of having things be good, the value of having things be good, of having things be right, those are values that I think I've been wanting to understand and explore more in our own thinking, our own concepts, before we start thinking about all of the other things, where it's led to, what it's led to. Looking at language and what it means, in other words, where it comes from. So in looking at our history, I really do think that when we say historical trauma, that trauma is on our bodies. It's a memory of what happens to you when you remember. And I mean remember. When you come back and occupy your body, there's a lot of fear that we've been carrying as to what happened to our people. What happened? I think that's what my grandmother was like, don't look back, don't go over there, don't go do that, because it's danger, and who's going to protect you? And that I think for all of us, whatever body we occupy, whatever gender, whatever we describe ourselves, occupying ourselves and being ourselves, I think, brings back that danger. And so it isn't just a question of like looking and studying, because usually what happens is I hear people talking about their root, looking at my roots. And I think, well, they're attached to us, right? They're us. We are the root. We are the planta, or the root, where the branches, where the leaves, where all of it. It's not someplace over there. Those who grow understand that. If we talk about roots outside of ourselves, more than likely they may not be alive. Not our roots, someone else's roots. So I think that aspect of it, and I know for myself, I ask myself, what is that language that wants to emerge, and at what point do you remember it? At what point do you bring yourself, and what stops you? Someone asked me the other day, invited me to Durango and asked me, why haven't I been back? And I had to ask myself, why haven't I made it a point to go back? And the truth, I was afraid that no one would recognize me. I don't know if I could take that. I deal with that all the time. But I don't know if I could go home and not have somebody recognize me. That, I think, would be the most painful thing to experience. And I think that's what we carry inside ourselves, this fear and this trauma that disallows us remembering ourselves, who we are, who we represent, all the pueblos. And really, when you look at the history of northern Mexico, doesn't it seem odd to you that a whole territory, which is always spoken about as an extension of the south, of the Mesoamerica, they always talk about Mesoamerica and they talk about the whole northern territories, mountains, desert, rivers, huge canyons as deep as the Grand Canyon, and they talk, and you wonder, where did the people go? There's no people there, like there was no people there. And you go, we're right here, folks, many of us. So I feel like that's, my concern then, that right now we've come to this place where we can't talk together.
Just going to ask if you could both use your mic, because there's other mics having some issues on the
Oh, okay.
live feed.
Okay.
This mic is bad?
Se oye bien aquí, pero not on the live feed. That's why.
Aquí está.
Okay.
I pass it to you.
It's kind of attached to the mic, but I think one of the things that people don't really understand is English. How many people speak English? Okay. ¿Y cuántos personas pueden hablar español? How many of you ever said, well, I speak my native language, I speak Spanish? I've seen people say that, and really, they're both hegemonic languages. Both of them have attempted to take away our indigeneity. It's all right to speak more than one language. Our people, it was very common to speak 5 or 6 languages. Native languages, other languages that we use in trade. The point I'm making with all of you is that's in each and every one of you, to bring that out. I'll tell you a Stanley story. I was in Cape Town, South Africa. I was there for a panel. I was speaking with women from Shoshone, women from India who's a Dalit, the untouchable caste, Zulu, man from one of the townships, and a woman who was Jamaican but lived in New York City all of her life. So we all introduced ourselves in our language first. And when I got to her, this lady, she said something that really touched my heart. She said, I'm an African woman here in Africa, and I don't know who my people are, and I don't speak my language. And after hearing all these people speak, I feel so alone. Your language, your culture is power. Ladies and gentlemen, it is power. When you have that, that is a line to the beginning when the Creator made everything. That is a language that was given to you. That is a culture that is given to you. Your ancestors, you can draw power from that. You learn your language. That is your secret code. When we were in North Dakota at the North Apple, we decided we were going to talk in Kumeyaay because there were FBI, there were all kinds of people out there, and we didn't know who was listening. So we talked in our language, we did these things, and we used our language. And there were Native people from other different places, and they came and they said, we don't speak our language anymore. We want what you have. We want to develop it. And that's why I'm saying it's in each and every one of you. You can bring it. And that is power. I remember one time I was in Ramona and I was talking to my aunt in Kumeyaay. And this old white woman, I'll call old white woman, And she tapped me on my shoulder, and I said, yes, excuse me. And she pointed at the American flag. And I said, and she said, excuse me, you're in America? You need to speak American? I explained it to her. As a matter of fact, I gave her a verbal enema. And after I was done with her, she said, I was just trying to help, and walked away. But that is the mindset that you're dealing with. What's happening on Monday? What's that? Indigenous people say, what it used to be called before? They say that, Kalua, what? Columbus Day. How did that whole thing start? How did we get Columbus Day as a holiday? What's that? What happened was in the 1920s, a group of Italians were massacred in Louisiana. So they decided to create a Columbus Day in order to appease the Italian immigrants who were outraged by this. And later on, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt decided to make it a holiday in order to unite the people. That Columbus discovered America. I know, I heard it, I was like, what? How many of you were out there in Chula Vista when we were, fighting to take down that statue, the Columbus statue? You were there. You were there. Remember what happened when we were there? I hate to pick on, another old white woman came up. And she said, how dare you? Columbus was a great man. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Well, Gloria and Imawat were getting ready to lynch her. And I said, hang on, wait. Let's not use the rope. We need it for something else. But the thing is, that is how she was taught. How many of you can relate to that by the propaganda that was taught to you in the school system? Ladies and gentlemen, what we need to do is change that narrative. Decolonize, indigenize our education system. How many of you heard about in Texas, they're really fighting about this critical race theory. Even Trump said, we need to teach the history that's good for America, our history. They don't want to teach the truth. And the truth hurts. But that's how we're going to move on. But I'll tell you this, it's not only here in the United States, it's also in Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, I was coming back up. British Honduras, the Caribbeans, Venezuela, okay, and Canada. All of these areas, our people have struggled to retain our indigeneity. But if we all work together, we can become strong. And last thing I'll say before I shut my snoot on this, when I talked about DQ, not too many people knew about it. Not too many people have heard of it. But DQ has the spirit of our indigeneity in it. Chicanos that came to fight to protect DQ University. Florencio Yescas, Angel Roberto Cobb, they were part of that. They were part of that decolonizing. Back then, there weren't very many dance groups. You could count them on your hand and you'll still have fingers left. Watch. You can count them on your hand, you'll still have fingers left. Now look at it. Look how it's grown. People are learning now what? Yoeme, Purepacha, all Mazateco, Huasateco, all these Kumkak, Kumeyaay, Pai Pai, Kiliwa, Kochimi, Kokopa, all these languages are being taught again in the communities. You cannot even realize the history that you have here. The people that helped create Chicano Park, this centro. Because our culture, your culture is important. And they want to pass that on to you. But in order to pass it on, you need to be ready to learn. They want to teach you. Knowledge without passing on is not knowledge. And this is something, and I'm going to pick on us real quick. We were just in our early 20s. Look what happened to us. I know life on the reservation is hard. 28-year-olds should never look like this, but, you know, one day you're going to be the elders. One day you're going to be the knowledge keepers. What are you going to teach to the descendants? If you don't learn, how are they going to know? And remember this last thing, I said I was going to shut my snoot, but last thing. How many of you have ever gotten angry at the way you and your people have been treated? One person, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay. How many of you ever wanted revenge? All right. I'll tell you this right now. The best revenge that you could ever do is your success. Your best revenge is that your language comes back, that your culture is intact, that you practice it. That is the best revenge that you could ever do. And you're going to watch the people that try to take your language, your culture, all these things away, they're going to be like this. And you'll be, take that. So I want to share that. It's an honor, privilege, and pleasure to speak to all of you. And it brings happiness to my heart. Thank you.
Well, I'm a little speechless right now. Stan, thank you. I want to open it up.
Before you open it up, can I borrow you for a moment? Come to me. My mom, she really thinks I'm a candidate. Can you take a picture of both of us? And last thing, how many of you are in the witness protection program? Because if you are, you might want to change your identity. Okay. All right, I got the pictures. Now we can
Gracias, you were here. Thank you, Stan. There is so much to say. I mean, a whole generation of discussion here. A couple generations now of discussion, actually. But I want to open it up to you, and if you have any questions or comments, and yes, I've been asked to have you be in one place, correct? Could camera catch folks?
You can move around, but yeah, you just have to hand the mic. You have to hand the mic out.
Okay.
Morning.
Hey everybody, my name is Brian Bradley. I want to thank both of you for sharing your experience with your culture and allowing me to be a part of it and listen and learn. And by the way, I like your t-shirt. At first I didn't read it right when it was back there. I do like Kanye West's music, but I like that shirt a lot better than the latest.
Let me show it to everybody.
Anyway, good stuff.
White Lives Matter.
That's right. I just wanted to just ask two things. I guess when you talk, one of the things you mentioned, ma'am, about uncovering the past in order to go forward to uncover the past and to find the truth from the colonized history, and I think that's very key and vital. And the second point that you both made or alluded to was about having knowledge and not sharing it is kind of useless and stuff. So I want to thank you both for taking the time out and not just focusing on the art, because I think the art speaks for itself. But that, and I just wanted to ask from an outsider perspective of, I'm a third-generation Irish Catholic from Philadelphia area, which just kind of popped up here. But when I hear the term, it's fairly new even too, and it sounded kind of, almost degrading in a way. I wanted to hear your thoughts on it. When you hear or watch a news channel that says Latinx and how that affects you as a culture and as your past, or not just Latin, but also indigenous people, because I know a lot of the history with the Native Americans from my time in this country, and just being grown up listening to punk rock and stuff and reading a lot. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that, and just thank you for letting me be here.
Well, I think that originally the idea of Latino was something that was used as a term to kind of think about all of us who spoke Spanish, all of us who had something in common with the culture also of the Americas. And so it was a way in areas where there were many different peoples, to be able to speak of ourselves. And then there was the imposition of words like Hispanic, which came from the Census Bureau, as a way to make it easier for them to, basically deground us. I mean, the whole point of our history to say who we are, even though right now we identify by nation state, in other words, Guatemala, Salvador, Mexico, nation state. Those are borders that sit on top of entire groups of peoples. There are many, many peoples underneath those designations. So it seems to me that the specificity then is, what is the relationship to the U.S. of Guatemala, Panama, Mexico, Cuba, Puerto Rico? There's a relationship historically to that. And we are here present in this, country because of those relationships. And so when we remove it, and we sort of enjoy this, we enjoy the process of assimilation, because that is assimilation as language. When you identify as a Latin, which is a language that is no longer commonly spoken, I don't know exactly what we have to do with a language that's not commonly spoken. If we agree to that, then it is a little easier, and culturally people enjoy it because you can share, you can. It's fun. Well, yeah, it's fun. Latinx, when you look at the production of culture, there's a lot of culture. Young people are producing. I can't even keep up. It's beautiful, between the arts and the spoken word and the music and it's amazing. But it's allowed and I think because it's a process of assimilation. You identify with the nation state, and then no, not even the nation state, you identify basically more broadly than that, But it does lift you up out of your particular historical experience, which I think matters. So identifying, who you are, I think is the most difficult thing, and coming back, and as we see, the wealth of the Kumeyaay, there's a wealth there, culturally. There's a wealth in the struggle. There's a wealth in the confrontation. And there's a wealth in the continuity and the survival. So who are we and where are we and what part of that do we play, I think is really what we're getting at. So identity isn't just about, like the ability to label ourselves. And when you say that it has kind of a derogative connotation, I would say it depends on who speaks it. Who speaks it, because so much is put on it. It's an othering as well. So it's a complex term. Those here who enjoy that, who support it in a way, because it facilitates the process of being as well. So I'm not, I felt, very strongly about not using the word Hispanic. I don't feel as strong, but what I do resist in terms of Latinx is that it kind of displaces again, and we agree to it, and I can't agree with the assimilation process. It's tricky. We're allowed to be Latinos, we're allowed to be Latinx, because it doesn't designate the history and remind this country of their responsibilities, what they've done historically. And that is something that I feel is important for us to know. So anyway, that's me. That's just my response to you. I'm sure there's a lot of others, much more informed responses. I think, if you ask generationally, you'll get different responses.
Just real quick, are you a native? Are you a native? No, but are you a native? Okay. All right. Okay. Listen to me. You are native from Ireland, right? Do you speak Gaelic? Okay. The point I'm making is what's happened to us happened to you. It's happened to all these displaced groups. And when we get in touch with our indigeneity, then we start to grow. And, you hear about, creating an atmosphere of tolerance. And even that term tolerance is a negative. It's saying, I tolerate this inclement weather, I tolerate this. Rather than that, breathe an atmosphere of celebration of the diversity, we all come together. Just want to say that. One last thing you said was about art. And I need to say this. How many of you are artists here? Boom, one. A number of you. In the Kumeyaay creation story, it talks about when Tuchapa, the creator, made the sun, got yellow clay, rolled into a ball, blew into it, and it started brightly, brilliantly bright, put it on his thumb, flicked into the sky, and it became Enya, the sun. Everybody look at your thumbnail. See that half circle? We say that that was left, the mark of the sun that was left on the Creator. So when the Creator made all of us, the Creator made us with a piece of the Creator in each and every one of us. So when you make artwork, that's a Creator coming out in you. When you dance, that's a Creator coming out in you. When you sing, that's a Creator coming out in you. All of this, we are part of the Creator. And I just want to share that, and that makes us all sacred.
So we have other questions. If I could ask people to kind of come here in this center space, maybe even line up if you have questions. And we'll take maybe like 2 or 3 together, just so that it could then be a broader response. Twalo.
Thank you both for being here. Listening to you guys is medicine, so thank you both. Hauka, Dr. Rodriguez, Mema Yampa. Dr. Rodriguez, I personally love San Diego. I love the technology, the communities, the food, the beautiful landscapes. But at the same time, it feels so dystopian to have so many outsiders who ignorantly build on unceded land, Kumeyaay land. And people falsely think that people are extinct. So that you guys are people that were instead of the people that are. So my question to you is, how do you cope with the pain of being forgotten by the masses in your own land? Yehan.
No, I think that's important to respond.
So you changed it yet?
Not yet. One more.
Okay, one more. I just want to say, this young man is from Peru. He's in the United States Navy, he's an officer in the Navy. When we did the 50 Thule boat run, and we did the tribal run, you represented the Quechua people. He came in first place. Give him a hand. And my answer to that is when they speak about us as Native people, they talk about us in the past tense. And I'm just going to talk about the Kumeyaay people. The Kumeyaay people used to gather acorns. The Kumeyaay people used to put Thule boats in the water. Kumeyaay people used to do this. Yeah, we did that about 2 months ago. We did that. Yeah, we gathered acorns last year. We're going to be gathering acorns next month. We are a people of the past, the present, and the future. And this is something that if we acquiesce to that and not say a thing, then we're just as guilty as the people who are oppressing us. We have a mouth, we have a voice, we can speak. Thank you very much.
Buenas noches, buenas tardes. I'm going to model something that I think is very important. My name is Veronica. I'm the daughter of Julio and Herminia. I'm the sibling of Viviana, Claudia, Teresa, Isabel, Tupac, Silvia, Esmeralda, Carla, Leonardo, Andres. I'm the spouse of David. I'm the mother of Shimalatl, Tonatzopelic, Graciano, and Adrian. And I am a member of this community. It's very important for me to model that connection because we all have that connection. Just as Dr. Rodríguez Cuchumayo has been showing us, that reinforcing, we have these things within us. So it's very important. And I want to acknowledge my sister who was here, Silvia Enrique, who was one of the first workers here at the Centro Cultural, whose work, whose sweat, whose blood and tears made this place possible 50 years ago, and whose daughter is making this place possible now. So it's all within us, not just in the metaphysical term, but in the very physical term of here and now, today. So I think that's one of the things that I want to reinforce with what you both have been saying, is that this dialogue has been going on for the last 50 years. It is part of who we are as Chicanos, as Chicanas, as raza in this community. Somos uno porque América es una. I remember when I was, running around here 50 years ago, from the tip of South America to the tip of Alaska, the whole continente. This is Abya Yala, this is our homeland, our homeland. Secondly, it's very important that we understand, and you all touched on, I think you, Roberto, you did too, that this dialogue is both a personal dialogue and interaction, as well as a public dialogue and interaction. It's the individual and the institution. It's that dynamic, and hopefully we will continue to have impact on an institutional level in terms of language acquisition, language maintenance, cultural growth and development. But remember, it's also that very personal, very individual. You're a prime example of this, compadrito, You did something, you yourself did something that helped move our community forward. That's a step that you took that benefits all of us. And it's possible for each and every one of us to do that. And secondly, and beyond that, I want to make sure that we recognize, just as I acknowledge my sister whose work made this place possible, acknowledge two very important families, the Brown family here on this side of the border, and Doña Teodora Cuera and her family on the other side of the so-called border. Like you say, who opened the doors, who welcomed us home. They did it in a very formal way. They also did that in a very, very informal way. Literally opening their doors and welcoming us into their home, and vice versa. So those are the kinds of things that have a history, have a trajectory that each of us also can be a part of. And then beyond that, I think you also mentioned talking about values. And those are the values that are represented, and practice, and the difference between looking at things theoretically, philosophically, and then what do we do in the day-to-day, you know? My teacher here has a habit of asking us questions in the audience, so I'm going to throw that out. How many of you, maybe today, maybe yesterday, had tortillas? Who ate tortillas? Who ate beans? You know, esquites, whatever. You know, this is how you are living our culture. As my mom used to say, we don't celebrate our culture just on Cinco de Mayo. We do it every single day, and we celebrate our culture. We celebrate our culture. And so I think that's when I want to reinforce. And the only reason I'm saying is because this time and this space, you know, it's important for me to make that connection. Because I am a product of a Centro Cultural. And all across the state and across the country, many of us have that benefit of being products of Centros Culturales, of danza circles, of folklorico groups, you know, of artist collectives. And that's the kind of thing we want to continue to encourage. We want to make sure that each of us recognizes that there's the institution, there's the group, there's also the individual. And it's that unique balance that each of us has the opportunity to continue to share and move our community and our culture forward. Thank you.
Others? Okay.
Gracias, Vero. Vero also played an important part. They were the people who broke down the chains and opened the doors that the city had locked. And we just did what we thought was right. And that's the bottom line. That's the integrity of each individual to do what is right. And we all know what that is. It's our upbringing, our education, our indoctrination, and our brainwashing that pushes away from that. Because we all have it, because we're all human beings. We're all human beings. So I also want to acknowledge Veronica because she was executive director for quite some time and had brought us into a new age of that interface that we all have to deal with because of where we are and because of the political lines that have been imposed upon us. That interface with the powers that be, but which we can do without sacrificing ourselves. And that's, I think, the hardest part that we have to, as individuals and as parents and as teachers, have to make sure that all the generations learn that they can interface and be on the other side without losing our identity. We celebrate ourselves in the face of adversity. We don't give up. But I also want to recognize Yerma, because once this theater was established, it was people like Yermo, artists, who made it real, the physical, the world you see, la dualidad. We have this great artist here. We have this gentleman here who is now also working. It takes work. It takes time. It takes sacrifice. And we don't always have that time and energy. But whatever you can do, just know it is to push forward not only your integrity, but the integrity of your children, the integrity of the people that you interact with, and is the example for those who have it not. So I just want to say thank you very much again for your art. And the last thing I want to say is that We are all artists, just as we are all Native. Our art is what we choose to make us happy, that we share. That's art.
Okay. I was just I do have a kind of common question real quick, and then I'll pass the mic. But just real quickly, especially for those of you that might be your first time here at the Centro Cultural La Raza, the Centro's mission for a long time has been to create, promote, preserve, and educate about Chicano, Mexicano, Indigenous, and Latino arts and culture. And for many years, the Centro being a volunteer organization, we've been doing the work of promoting, preserving, and educating. But in recent years, we were talking about how we haven't really been as proactive in the creating part. And that's something that in the last 4 or 5 years, we've really tried to shift the terrain here to get back to that original mission and that creative aspect. And so I say that both in terms of the mission of the Centro, but also to ask both of you if you could also speak to that part of creative, right? Not just in the artistic sense, but tied to this question of our own embracing and engaging with our indigeneity and our creative side and our relationship to creator, for that matter, in the process of creation and ongoing creation. So that's my comment / question. Yeah.
I'm Shuri. I have so many questions, but a couple of things that I think that are thank you for all of it, both of you and the Centro, but the hard questions is that I feel really the relations between, not here in this spot, and not como hable usted, no? It's like, it gives me great faith. There's a certain understanding of our proximity as Chicanos and Northern Native people. We're talking about that divide. What sometimes is very heartbreaking is how much Northern Native people, not at one time Spanish-speaking Northern Native people. In other words, people that are this is what we were 50 years ago. Raza and Indígena were almost igual, in the sense of that there was a sense that being Chicano meant that you recognized, it was Chicano, you recognized that you were Indígena, right? And that was the alliance you had with other Northern Native people. But when you move out of the places, the areas in which the Spanish colonized, in other words, when you move out of the areas that aren't at one time Mexico, those conversations between Northern Native people and Raza are much more difficult because they do not necessarily recognize Chicanos or extending that to Latinos or extending that to Latinx as indigenous people. Instead, we're being called settler colonists, right? This language of academia is what scares me when we're talking about education. What scares me is I have my students telling me, brown they get to be, telling me, oh no, but we're settlers. And I say, who's telling you you're settlers? And what's happening is that really structurally, I'm telling you, because this is what's going across all these universities, that young Latinos, and you're talking about California, where we're supposed to be Hispanic serving institutes, right? Again, the assimilationist term. But what's really, really scary is in very, very recent years, kids can look themselves in the mirror and still say that they're the settlers. So this is a preoccupation, one, and the other preoccupation I have, or just symbolic of it, is that, we're talking about Columbus, but don't mess with Unipro Serra, right? I mean, our people are so Católica, and so then you're saying, well, we got to take that statue down too. And it's so, you're laughing at it. I laugh too, because this is such a contradiction. I'm in Santa Barbara, and there's a, yeah, man, you know, we're native, man, we're native. And I'm looking at the pinche statue, in the shadow of that statue, right? And that happened the same way when he was made a saint, and then we go down to Carmel, that's where he's buried. And we're there, all the, you know, like all of the native protests is in the cementerio, and right next there is a big mass and everything. We go, let's go to the church. Let's go, guys, let's go there. No, we can't do that. I mean, that would be disrespectful, right? Well, I'm not anyone to say different. I mean, I'm not going to say different. But we know different. And so these are the contradictions, you know, is what I just would like to see if both of you could address that a little bit. I know more what Celia thinks, but no, quiero saber. I just anyway. Oh, this, we don't need this? Yeah. I'm going to respond. I'm going to pass it to Stan. Okay.
You know, because I was a lesbian, because I was a feminist, you know. I mean, whatever people put on me before I even recognized it myself, you know, it's like, oh, thank you for telling me. It would have taken me longer to figure it out. I wanted to say that because sometimes it gets occulted. It gets, you know, I forget now. I'm just like, this is who I am. But I wanted to say it because it was part of the contradiction of trying to be part of cultura and realizing that we have a lot of aspects in our cultura that really, you know, in terms of who I was as a young woman, as a girl, that really affected my growing, my abilities. But, you know, to participate, to be a part of something. But in that, my mom's, you know, language to me about having integrity and being able to stand up, I think that, you know, I continued to make work. It allowed me to make work I never would have made because I had to keep creating ground. And in creating ground, it helped me make relationships and build relationships, you know. And so sometimes I say, the truth is that sometimes we have to step out of line. I said that earlier, we have to step out of line. It's very frightening to step out of line. You know, you're not going to, people are not, I would say recently, if people say, hey, Celia, we got your back. Lately I've been saying, tell you what, why don't you all stand in front of me? And I'll have your back. Because what happens is people take 3 steps back. And they've got your back from back there. So I think that I want to say that because it's not something that's over. The struggles and contradictions we have within our communities are very much alive. And we're struggling with it, and generationally struggling with it. So, and the second thing is in terms of this, you know, how it is amongst Native people and Northern Native peoples, having a hard time to see the Spanish speaking, you know, there's still, this country is a racist country. It affects every single one of us. It lives within all our bodies. We have prejudices. We have prejudices about the language. And one thing I am certain of is that those of us who have been displaced from our nations, it's a policy, starting with the, you know, with the papal bulls and, you know, all of the original policies of discovery and the continuity, you know, of those laws. The first laws of the Americas had to do with the movement of our bodies. And I think the second laws had to be with our, you know, the decision not to allow us to reground ourselves. We are not allowed to have ground. We are not allowed to name place. Those of us who have been removed from our territories are not, there's not an allowance of return. You know, and that's within our own communities sometimes. So I feel like that's an issue that we don't talk about. You know, so when you say that the North, you know, North is infected by this racism, so are we in many ways. It just looks different. We may not call it racism, but this ability not to see ourselves and not to be recognized, I think that's policy that we are contending with and have to think about. We, those of us here, you know, who have interest in this, you know, this is our homework. I keep saying that it's our homework. So I'm going to pass on the settler self-identity to Stan here.
Thank you. Before I talk about that, to share that when I went to go teach in Canada, flew in Vancouver, and they asked me, what am I? I told them I'm a Native American. They said, Stanley Rodríguez, that's your last name? I go, yeah, Rodríguez. And they said, so you're claiming First Nation status? I said, yep. And they said, we don't see very many First Nation people with the last name Rodríguez. And I said, where I'm from, yeah, there's quite a few. And they said, where are you from? I said, San Diego. And they said, how far is that from the Mexican border? I can see it from my backyard. And then they said, do you ever go to Mexico at least once or twice a week? I said, come with us to the next room. And have you ever seen those shows where they're at these airports and they're stripping people and checking all their luggage? Well, that's what they did to me. And they said that drug cartel people, they were concerned that drug cartel people were coming into Canada. And finally they found out that I had nothing. A couple of, what do you call that? Rolades, but that was it. So then I went to Quebec, and the people there speak what? French. Vous parlez français? No. So, the Anishinaabe people, they spoke their language and they spoke French. But there was this one lady who was Anishinaabe. She spoke her language, French, and she also worked for the United Nations in Guatemala. She learned how to speak Spanish. So guess who they paired me with? Her. So, using Spanish and working with First Nations people, that was something that I did for 2 weeks with this lady. So, it's a hit and miss. Sometimes it can be to your benefit, sometimes it can be a detriment. But you know, in the end, your indigeneity will move you through. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is this person, Father Huneprio Serra. Well, he's not my father. And when he came to San Diego, he's the one that put the first mission there. And remember what they were doing. They wanted to sequester the people. They wanted to use the people as forced slave labor, indoctrinate them into Catholicism, and teach them rudimentary skills in anticipation of Spanish colonists coming in. They would have a servant caste waiting for them, already trained. That's not how that works with our people. We attacked them, we killed a lot of people. Now, what happened, and I'm laughing because I was at the meetings with other Native groups when they were talking about Huneprio Serra being cantonized. We were up in the Bay Area. I was completely against it. I said the guy's a scumbag. He's a piece of, you can imagine what else I said. It was our own Native people. One who was an Ohlone, who was studying to be a priest. He is the one that opened the door for all that. We voiced our opposition. I even told them, we are in your territory, and I'm being nice talking to you about this. And I'm saying no. I am saying no, no, no. If you come into my territory, we're going to have a very different conversation. And he, you know what? He heard all of us from all over California talking about this. It was like pissing on a rock and trying to get the middle wet. It didn't happen. All he could say was, after he's cantonized, I don't know what I'll do with my life after that. I go, you're not listening to a thing we're saying. So they did it. And they had him up there when they did that, when they cantonized him. You know who I'm talking about. Those people up there. And, you know, he completely discounted the damage that was done in our tribal areas. That person was the architect of the murder of millions of people. So I just want to share that. So I'm laughing because I remember that guy. I remember that pig. And we wandered it out over at the Presidio. How many of you ever been to the Presidio over here by Old Town? Well, something happened. They wanted to do a ceremony to honor all the Spanish soldiers that were at the Presidio. It turned into the fool was flying a big free-for-all. Kumeyaay people were there in force. One of the Kumeyaay people, Martha, she grabbed the Kumeyaay flag from somebody dressed as a Spanish soldier, yanked it. He cried. His mother cried. She was from Ensenada. She said, "Why can't we all just get along?" And I said, "No, this is something that's going on because another romanticized lie is being portrayed if we do not step forward and do something about it." A lot of his statues have been damaged. A lot of these things have been done. And I'm going to tell you, I have some real veteran activists here. You know what I'm saying. When we do a call to action, we need to stand together. In solidarity, we are power. We are powerful. And not everything has been done yet. We want to pass it on to the next generation. But if you don't do it, we'll do it ourselves. So
we have time maybe for one last round of questions. We have two hands up, David here and then Anita.
Yeah, it's not so much a question, but I'll be as brief as possible. In 1992, the Catholic Church wanted to take the second step to Canada. That was beatification. And throughout the state of California, California Indians said no. And they talked about the history and the brutality of Junipero Serra. Rupert Costo, who you're very familiar with, Stan, the California Indian historian, sent a letter to Herman Baca, the head of the Committee on Chicano Rights at that time, and he said, your people knew the brutality of the Spaniards long before the people up here in the north knew it. Going back to 1492, and in Mexico, the landing of the Spaniards in Veracruz. I thought that was incredible that Rupert knew of Herman and reached out to him. This building is located in Balboa Park, which is often referred to as a jewel of San Diego. I worked here in this building for 10 years and would walk around Balboa Park often. It's a lovely place. It truly is, and well landscaped. But it's a complete fantasy land of Spanish colonial architecture. You could find wedding cakes with icing that are more accurate in their depiction of the architecture of that time. But as complicated as I am, I love it for what it is. Wedding cake icing. The only place where you get a sense of who we are, and I want to point out again, Yelporanda, is this mural here. Please stand up for just a moment. Just stand up for a moment, please. You mentioned the Q and DQ. Yeah, thank you. You mentioned that the Q and DQ stood for Quetzalcoatl, and you see the feathered serpent winding its way up into the center with a ceramic head. When people come into the Centro, they don't hear a history of the region going back to 1769. They hear a history of the people going back to the Mexica, going back and recognizing beyond that. And I think that for me this evening has been extremely emotionally powerful to see you and Celia together talking about, I think one of the things you said tonight, Celia, that knocked me out. How is it that I know I'm Indigenous? My mom and dad didn't talk about it. They lived it. But how is it that I know? How is it after all these centuries of attempting to strip us of that identity, I still have it? Yermo Aranda, La Familia, Enrique are part of that reason. Thank you for being here. It's really a momentous occasion.
Hi. Thank you so much. I'll try to keep this brief. I stumbled in today, and I realize I'm exactly where I need to be. So my name is Carita Gutierrez. I'm the new director of the Latino Center of Art and Culture in Sacramento, California, which was originally known by the name of La Raza Galeria Posada. And it is an honor to be here right now. And as I listen to you share about your experiences, to mention the name of Maestra Cobb with so much respect and grace. And as I listen to the work that you've done, that you're doing, the culture work, working with our communities, I have two questions. One is, what advice would you give to someone who's stepping into this space and trying to do right by their community? And secondly, what are some lessons learned that perhaps you can impart? So maybe my job is not as difficult, even though it is still a labor of love. So I'm coming to you with asking for advice. Thank you.
We just moved back. So I would say when you think about community, think about communities. That it's just not one community, but many communities present in Sacramento. And that, working amongst them and around them, is inviting them to participate also in their own way, in their own needs, and listening to how they would like to proceed. Sometimes I feel like, we have this hold on the top, and sometimes I feel like generationally we're also afraid of our youth. I have seen so many ways in which our youth are not invited to participate, and their expertise goes unrecognized. Sometimes we think of them as laborers, they can come in and do all the fill-ins and they can participate that way. But in terms of creating, in terms of having vision, from their experience, we don't think of that they have long vision in that way. So someone the other day was talking about looking at our children as our future. We were having a discussion in one of my classes, I think. And we're talking about looking at our children as the elders. That's our future. And for me, Galeria de la Raza was so impactful, and especially since it generated what came from it, Tere Romo, who basically did Tere, right? And others, many others, that participated. Same as here, to keeping the bookstore, one of the very first Chicano bookstores, which was a suitcase full of books present at every conference. It became a place. So I welcome, the life force to return in that space and continue on. So I would say, broaden the vision around to not just one community, but many that live there, and invite folks to come in and participate. And I think that will, because I think that will kind of open up new opportunities. And instead of looking at the wealth as coming from above, in terms of grants and sort of moving towards the grants, do the work, lay the foundation, see the dream, and then allow that to come in, that kind of support for the work you've already established. I think that's what I've seen here, and so I'll say that much. That's Stan.
I lived in Sacramento for a little while myself when I was a student at TQ. But I remember out in Sacramento you had some gifted people getting buy-in from the community. Have them, let you know what is it that they want I think many times we go into a community, we have our own ideas, but we don't get buy-in from them. And we may be off base sometimes. And your resources out there. I remember a group called the World Chicana Air Force. I really thought I had planes back then, but they were fly. And I just got to do a quick Stanley story. There was a guy named Arturo Singh. He was my art teacher at DQ. He called himself the Chicano Guru. And they had a big fight with the Royal Chicano Air Force. I was there. Somebody had a heart attack, took him to the hospital. But the bottom line is, you got discussion from the community. And some great ideas flew out, fur flew too, but great ideas happen. And at times there's going to be dissent. At times it's going to be uncomfortable. I would recommend go to Ross Dress for Less, buy a couple of pair of asbestos underwear, because you might need them sometimes. It might get warm in the meetings, but you'll be fine. Thank you.
This has been a great evening. Thank you. I have a few comments. They may not be related to each other. I don't know how they connect. But as I was listening, something was talking to me from inside, telling me, well, you should say something. Okay. Resistance. The first step is survival. I don't know my grandparents, don't know my stories. I don't know my Yoeme or my Mayo ancestors, except for a few names and a few cities. I'm researching. My daughter and I are making a library. We're collecting every book we can find. If it's about language, it's about culture, tradition, songs, dances. It's really, I'm 75 years old, and I feel like I'm 5 years old because I'm learning all this new stuff, and it's really inspiring. If you don't know anything about your ancestors, even if it's your parents or your grandparents, don't just give up. Find out where were they born, or where did they die, or does anybody know what they did for a living, or has anybody had any stories at all, and write them down. Write them down. Those are little baby steps, but they get larger and larger. And you'll be surprised of all of a sudden resources come to you because you're looking for them. If you weren't looking for them, if you're just sitting home, on your computer, you won't get the answers that you're looking for. So don't be blind. Open up your eyes. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to stay very open and very flexible. I'm also trying to use this less and use this more, because when this is moving, I'm not learning anything. And I want to learn as much as I can. I don't blame my relatives for not, if they had any stories and they didn't repeat them to my generation, I don't blame them. I know it was survival. You said you were Mexican. You didn't say that you were Yoeme. You said you were Mexican because, okay, you're all right. Otherwise, you might end up a slave. So I don't blame any of that. But I am trying to gather as much information as possible in order to, how do I put this? In order to be able to say who I am. Self-identity is the key to who you are. I challenge all of you, once a year, get a notebook. Once a year, write down your self-identity, who you are, in any way possible. Bloodline, languages, customs, what you feel inside. I remember in elementary school, I wanted so much to be like related to Tonto, who I'd see on TV, you know? And I go, oh, why is it my want for Tonto, not for the Lone Ranger? I don't know, but there's something in my blood, there's something here that was guiding me. And I was so thankful that later on in life, I said, oh my God, here it is. The secret to all my questions is right before me. I'm indigenous. That's why I love nature so much and animals and trying to be part of a community. I don't want to be an individual. I want to be part of a group. I want to work together, because working together, it's not work anymore, it's play. It's so much more fun that way. And you're doing it with smiles and the ambiente, you know, it's all good. It's positive. That's what I want out of life, positivity. So when they ask on the census, to identify yourself, I put indigenous. I said, you know, before that, Chicano. To me, in 1969, when I started using the term Chicano, it was a political stance, not about my family or my traditions. It was more political. It was, hey, yeah, my family speaks Spanish. Yes, I speak English. And I live in two worlds. I love the Spanish-speaking world. They lived in Tecate. My family was in Tecate. My parents met, fell in love, and married in Tecate, but they were born here. But every weekend we had to go to Tecate to see my uncle and my cousins, and they were so different. They were so happy to see you. They wanted to feed you. They wanted to play with you. It was all positive. And then when I come over here to San Diego, where I was born, there was this feeling of separation. I don't like the word assimilate. I don't want to assimilate with anything that started with the theft of a whole continent. I don't agree with it. Yeah, I vote, and yes, I live here, and yes, my grandkids are here, and so, you know, life is here. But that division, I don't like that at all. To me, in every country in the whole wide world, there are indigenous people. They're original peoples, whether it be Ireland or Canada or here. First Nation peoples. And they need to be honored and remembered if we are to know who we are and what we aspire to be. So I challenge all of you, once a year, just take note. I am, and then complete it. Identify yourself. And you'll be surprised how it changes each year as you develop. That's it.
Do you want any palabras para cerrar? And I do want to remind folks we have some treats over here, and if you haven't had a chance to check out the galleries as well. Pero,
I just want to say thank you for your patience and listening, and I do encourage you to please have some food and come and look at the show, por favor. I'd love to hear you comment while I'm here, if you have comment, or I think someone put a book there also. Imawat did, and so I'm looking forward to chatting with all of you today, and stick around a little bit, and thank you. Pardon me? Oh, Sunday, yes. Sunday we're having a conversation with Cherie and Irena Cervantes, Cherie Moraga, about the work. So please come back and enjoy it. We'll be here from, is it 2? from 2 p.m. And it'll be the closing reception, and hopefully then we can continue to, think about the work itself in that gallery. Thank you. Thank you to all of you.
Just want to say thank you for coming and listening and sharing. We all learn from each other. Each one of you is a library of knowledge. When we put it together, we all become strong. So don't forget your indigenous foods. Do we have indigenous foods here? Okay. Don't forget tortillas, beans, or as we say in Kumeyaay, mash, marik, wasabi. We have names for those too. We eat those. And real quick, I'm going to be going to Panama in December. I'm going to be kicking it with the Kumeyaay people, the tribal people. And I'm going to Peru. I was invited to go because we make tule boats to see how they do it over there. And I'm also looking forward to trying the traditional Peruvian roasted guinea pig. Drool. I can't wait. So, thank you, everybody.